Greetings and welcome to another Ball Tech On Demand timely topic. Today we are going to talk about receiving and planting poinsettia cuttings that are coming in hot, heating up on the truck. I'm Bill Calkins and I'm happy to be joined by James Doukas. Welcome, James.
Thanks, Bill. Great to be here.
James is currently the Ball FloraPlant and Selecta 1 Northeast and Great Lakes Territory Manager. He works daily with growers of all sizes to select and grow the best crops. Before joining the Ball FloraPlant and Selecta 1 team, he was lead grower at Tidal Creek Growers in Davidsonville, Maryland, and also a propagation manager at Homestead Growers. James received his Bachelor of Science from University of Maryland in plant science, focused on horticulture and crop rotation. He interned with Homestead Growers in Davidsonville, Maryland, and at the USDA Citrus Quarantine ARS facility in Beltsville, Maryland. James knows a lot about poinsettias. He learned from industry experts, learned at university. He's learned from experienced growers and has tons of his own hands-on experience. So James, it's week 24. Poinsettia cuttings are shipping. The temperatures are really rising in many areas of North America. You guys hearing from many growers wondering how to handle cuttings that heated up in transport?
I'd like to say it's probably a weekly job. There's always a hot part of the region of the country at this time of year, especially talking all of North America as well.
Excellent. And I know that this isn't a topic that's only arising this year. This is something that growers deal with many years, just the time of year that we're shipping the cuttings. So why don't you start a little bit about what this kind of heat does to a young plant and just sort of from a plant perspective, what's happening on the truck when they're heating up?
Well, you have two things going on. So you have a peak of temperature, but you also have duration. So you can get a peak of temperature and not have a what we would call cellular death event. But if you have a peak temperature for a long enough time period, then yes, you're going to get something growers would routinely receive cuttings where they open a bag and things are completely melted down. That is something that reached a peak temperature for a specific duration. And depending on the genus, that's all different types of varieties eventually experience the same sort of pattern there.
Okay, so I think that's a good reminder, good thing for growers to be aware of what's actually happening in the bag on the truck. But today we are going to talk specifically about poinsettias and how to handle them when they come in after coming off a hot truck. And I'd imagine, like any crop, avoiding stress and poor conditions in the early stages are going to help reduce the problems and losses throughout the entire production process. So what should growers be doing to minimize potential issues with these hot cuttings coming in? And similarly, what are some tactics that you can share to help growers cool them down?
Okay, so first, whenever you receive your cuttings, take them in, get them into a shaded area, and immediately start really opening boxes. Use a digital thermometer. You want to check the outside and the inside and the center of the box, just kind of see what the gradients of the temperatures are. Open the bags, try and laser some plant material, right? Anything kind of above a 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius, you want to move those cuttings and cool them overnight would be preferred. Minimum 4 hours, because I know sometimes you have crews that you want to get going on these things. But really, I would encourage growers to look at it this way. You want to make sure that you start clean so you can finish clean, and there's no reason to spend the time and labor and starter material, right, to stick a cutting that has been overheated in transport that's not going to be good and viable for you to produce a liner anyway. So if the temps are near 50 degrees, Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius in the center of the box and warmer down the edge, more than likely you're going to be fine. But if practical, really store the cuttings overnight for you. And you're just going to check them in the morning to make sure that they're turgid before you get your lines going and start sticking.
Okay, so if possible, put them in a cooler.
Yeah, and ideally too, that these cuttings are going to arrive. So I would encourage you to check out your cooler or your refrigerator or your cooling space prior to that. 95% of the growers I interact with, we don't have new equipment or materials. So in that cooler, you can have a thermostat that could have a 5-degree swing that you're not really aware of. Really what you're looking for in that cooler, you want to set it to 50 degrees, but you want it to stay around 50 degrees, ideally not to get lower. So most coolers, they'll have a swing of anywhere of 3 to 5 degrees. Yeah, if you set it at 50 degrees, it might get as low as 45 degrees. Well, that wouldn't be good for a poinsettia that you're trying to store overnight. So know your min-max. I would encourage you to put a min-max thermometer in a cooler overnight prior to receiving your cuttings at its set point, just to know the fluctuations, because equipments are and environments are always different in their applications. And while you might be comfortable with the swing in early spring when you're used to getting cuttings, in summer, that outside environment of that cooler is also different. So you got to make sure that that interior environment is still maintaining an even temperature setting. So,
Okay. So
receive your cuttings, pre-cool the cooler. Ideally, remove the cuttings from the bag and exchange air. If possible, move them to some clean, disinfected trays and add moisture as needed before storing them. Again, minimum of 4 hours, best overnight. And the next morning before you go to stick, the cutting should be firm and crisp and turgid. Okay, if you start to see any sort of melting at that time, don't waste your time.
okay, and what I guess maybe what does the actual cutting look like when you know that it's time to dump it versus stick it?
So traditionally, you're going to see something that was nice and green, a turgid cutting, a viable plant. You're going to see a shade of brown. It'll become mushy, and you'll start to see a degradation in that. Sometimes it's also, but not always, accompanied with leaf abscission. So your leaves will start to fall off of the stem, but that is not 100%. We do not see that all the times in all cases. But those are things that you'll know when you see it. I would also say smell, but not always will you really get that built up smell overnight.
Okay, I think that wow, it's good, quick, concise information. I think that the listeners are going to appreciate that. Do you have anything to add before we close today? Is there any words of wisdom on poinsettia and starting poinsettias that you want to share with the listeners? Anything that you've run into in the past, or anything that you've learned that it's a good reminder at this point in the game?
No, I mean we always have our own secret tips. Make sure that after we stick these nice cool cuttings and they're turgid, don't forget to mist them before they make their way out to the greenhouse. Don't leave naturally don't leave the cuttings unmisted on carts or whatever. Just the little things. You just have to tighten up a little bit more in this hot environment and make sure that when your crews go on breaks, everybody knows things are back in the cooler or they're down getting automatic misted. It's really simple things, but sometimes we get a little lazy with the heat and get distracted, honestly.
Makes total sense. And I think one of the things you said early on that it probably is good to reiterate is know when your shipments are going to arrive. Everything's trackable these days. Just be aware, be ready. Don't have to react when it happens. Be a little bit prepared ahead of time. So,
in particular, this year is a little bit different naturally as we're coming out of different restrictions, and international shipments are a little bit of a challenge. So not everything might arrive on traditional days. So please check with your tracking apps and your distributors on how things are scheduled to arrive, and just be aware that all of the companies that provide genetics are attempting to work through these logistical challenges.
excellent. I appreciate it, James. Hopefully, listeners, that you got some really good ideas and strategies from this quick video. So on behalf of Ball Tech On Demand and our entire technical services team, of which James is a top-notch member, keep your cuttings cool and have a fantastic poinsettia season. I do want to take this opportunity for a really quick reminder about the Greenhouse Tech Team. It's a community on Facebook of greenhouse professionals. It's a closed Facebook group. It's moderated by Ball Tech On Demand, but there are now more than 1,000. There's actually more than 1,200 members around the world. One of the exciting things is you can post a question, post a picture, and you'll most likely get a response within an hour from an expert or a peer who's actually had that exact same problem. So go ahead, jump on Facebook, search Greenhouse Tech Team in the search box. We'll ask you a couple qualifying questions just to make sure you're a professional grower, and you will be welcomed into the community. So once again, James, I appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll be back to cover plenty more topics in the future.
Hope so, Bill. Talk to you later. Thank you.